Light is not always a messenger. Sometimes, it is a wall. If you stand directly in front of a searchlight, you do not see the machine projecting the beam. You do not see the dust in the cold night air. You do not see the landscape stretching out behind it. You only see the glare, the sheer, blinding violence of the photons crashing into your eyes. The light burns away the context. It hides whatever is standing right next to the source. This is the great irony of our place in the dark. We can see entire ancient galaxies burning billions of light years away, because the expanding void of space stretches and dims their light into something manageable. But our closest neighbors, the star systems sitting right on our cosmic doorstep, they are hidden behind impenetrable walls of atomic fire. Proximity is a trap. It is a blinding glare that creates the deepest shadows. Just over 4 light years away sits the Alpha Centauri system. It is our next-door neighbor. We gave it a name. We charted its position on our maps. We even dreamed of building our very first interstellar missions around it. We thought, because it was close, that it was familiar. We were completely wrong. For thousands of years, human beings stared at that bright point in the sky, assuming we understood what was there. But looking with the naked eye, or even with massive telescopes on the ground, is exactly like staring into that searchlight. You see the glare. You do not see the ghosts hiding inside the glare. To see through the wall of light, you need a machine specifically designed to look at the cold, invisible universe. You need the James Webb Space Telescope. In August 2024, the team operating the James Webb Space Telescope did something incredibly risky. They aimed the most sensitive infrared mirrors ever built by human hands at a target that was technically far too bright to look at safely. They built a custom, highly complex sequence just to artificially block out the overwhelming fire of Alpha Centauri A, our closest sun-like neighbor. They were searching for faint glowing embers deep inside the habitable zone, and they found one. The telescope detected a tiny, faint point of light, a strong candidate for a gas giant, roughly the mass of Saturn, sitting right where it should not be. It was a monumental discovery, a world circling our closest stellar neighbor. But that is not the disturbing part. In 2 critical follow-up observations taken in the year 2025, the team pointed the James Webb Space Telescope back at Alpha Centauri. They looked exactly where the planet should be. They expected to track its orbit through the dark. It was gone. It did not merely move out of frame. It did not just dim slightly behind a cloud of dust. It vanished, erased from the data. The researchers quietly referred to it as the case of a disappearing planet, and the implications of that empty space. To understand why a disappearing world is so deeply unsettling, we first have to completely deconstruct a lie. It is a lie we have been telling ourselves since the very first humans looked up at the night sky and connected the dots to make constellations. We look up, and we see a peaceful, silent painting. We see a static ceiling of tiny white diamonds above our heads. It feels calm, and it feels eternal. But the universe is not a painting. It is a violent, deafening, unforgiving machine. And our intuition about how this machine works is almost entirely wrong. Let us start with the concept of distance. We hear scientists say that Alpha Centauri is our closest stellar neighbor. It is just 4 light years away. 4 light years. When you say that out loud, it sounds small. It sounds like the next town over. It creates a false sense of intimacy. But human brains did not evolve to comprehend the true scale of space. We evolved to understand distances we could walk, or maybe ride a horse across. Light travels at roughly 186,000 miles every single second. 1 light year is the distance that light can travel in an entire year. That is almost 6 trillion miles. So, when we say our closest neighbor is 4 light years away, we are talking about a gap of almost 24 trillion miles of absolute, freezing nothingness. If you could get in a car and drive toward Alpha Centauri at 60 miles per hour without ever stopping for gas or sleep, it would take you nearly 48 million years to get there. Even our fastest machines cannot conquer this void. Back in the 1970s, we launched the Voyager space probes. They are currently hurtling away from our solar system at tens of thousands of miles per hour. Even at that blistering speed, if Voyager were aimed directly at Alpha Centauri, it would take over 70,000 years to arrive. Proximity in space is a cruel joke. Because of this massive distance, looking at other solar systems is like trying to diagnose a software glitch on a global server with massive latency. You are never seeing the universe exactly as it is right now. You are only ever seeing the universe as it was in the past. When the light from Alpha Centauri hits your eyes tonight, you are seeing light that left that star 4 years ago. The information is always delayed. You are looking at a ghost of the past, hoping it tells you the truth about the present. But distance is only the first barrier. The second barrier is our deep, historical arrogance about how planets are made. For centuries, we lived in a bubble. We looked at our own solar system and we assumed it was the absolute standard template for the entire galaxy. We have a nice, quiet sun sitting right in the middle. We have rocky planets like Earth and Mars orbiting safely up close. We have massive gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn acting as gravitational shields further out. It is neat. It is orderly. It moves like the gears of an expensive, carefully crafted grandfather clock. Because this is the only home we have ever known, we assumed the rest of the galaxy must play by the same rules. We assumed that if we looked at other stars, we would find other perfectly ordered clocks. But the deeper we look into the dark, the more we realize that our peaceful little solar system is a rare, bizarre exception. Most of the galaxy is not a clock. Most of the galaxy is a demolition derby. And the Alpha Centauri system is the perfect example of this chaos. When you look at Alpha Centauri with the naked eye, it looks like a single bright star. But it is not. It is actually a multi-star system. The two main stars, Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B, are locked in a relentless, spinning gravitational dance. Imagine trying to build a delicate house of cards on a table. Now, imagine trying to build that house of cards while two heavy men are violently wrestling, shaking the table back and forth. That is what it is like for a planet trying to form in a binary star system. Planets are born from flat disks of dust and gas spinning around a newborn star. Over millions of years, gravity gently clumps this dust together into rocks. And those rocks crash together to form planets. It is a fragile process. It requires balance. But when you have two massive suns orbiting each other, there is no balance. Their combined gravity creates violent tides in the fabric of space. The gravitational pull is constantly shifting, stretching and tearing the planetary construction zone apart. For a very long time, many brilliant scientists believed that a stable planet simply could not exist in a system like this. The mathematical models suggested that any planet trying to form there would either be shredded into dust or thrown completely out of the system, doomed to float through the pitch-black void of deep space forever as a frozen, rogue world. The very idea of a massive gas giant, roughly the size of Saturn, surviving in the habitable zone of Alpha Centauri A, went against our most basic intuitions of astrophysics. But the universe does not care about our math. The universe does not care what we think is impossible. This brings us to the ultimate technological hurdle. How do you actually prove a planet is there? You cannot just point a camera at the star and take a picture. Stars are essentially colossal, continuously detonating nuclear bombs. They are blindingly bright. Trying to see a planet orbiting a star is like trying to spot a single, tiny firefly fluttering directly in front of a coastal lighthouse while you are standing thousands of miles away. The glare hides everything. To see the firefly, you have to block the lighthouse. You have to create an artificial eclipse. This is why the team using the James Webb Space Telescope had to use a device called a coronagraph. Think of it like holding your thumb up to block the blinding sun so you can see a bird flying across the sky. The telescope uses precision-engineered physical masks to block the overwhelming fire of the central star, allowing the incredibly faint light of the surrounding planets to bleed through the darkness. But doing this in space is a mechanical nightmare. Starlight does not travel in perfectly straight lines. It bends, it diffuses, it leaks around the edges of the mask to capture the heat signature of a hidden planet. The telescope's mid-infrared instrument had to be artificially cooled down to nearly minus 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It had to become one of the coldest objects in the known universe, just to sense a tiny spark of heat hiding in the glare of our closest neighbor. And in 2024, that spark was there. The telescope saw it. The data confirmed it. A massive world, defying the violent gravity of two suns, existing exactly where our old textbooks said it should not be. It was a triumph of human engineering. It was proof that we could look through the blinding searchlight and find the ghosts hiding in the glare. We finally knew our neighbor. We finally understood our closest companion in the void. Or so we thought. Because when they looked back 1 year later, the ghost was gone. The space was empty. The math broke all over again. We are standing on the edge of a very dark, very deep ocean. We are throwing pebbles into the water, trying to guess what kind of monsters live at the bottom based on the ripples. And right now, the ripples are telling us a story that we do not want to hear. A story that suggests our grip on reality is far weaker than we ever imagined. If you seek the truth in the dark, if you want to unravel the mysteries that challenge our very understanding of existence, subscribe. Join us on this journey. We demand permanence from the universe. We need to believe that when we look away from the sky and then look back, the things we saw will still be exactly where we left them. If you park your car in an empty lot, lock the doors, and walk away, you expect it to be there when you return. If you come back the next day and the lot is completely empty, your brain immediately searches for a logical explanation. It was towed. It was stolen. You parked on the wrong street. You do not assume the car simply ceased to exist. You do not assume the basic laws of physics have suddenly stopped working. Mass cannot be erased. Millions of pounds of metal and glass cannot vanish into thin air. Now, multiply that mass by billions. Multiply it by trillions. Imagine a sphere of raging gas and crushing pressure, roughly the size of the planet Saturn. A world so massive that you could fit hundreds of Earths inside of it. A world with violent storms raging in its upper atmosphere, with winds whipping at thousands of miles per hour. A world with a gravitational pull so immense that it bends the very fabric of space around it. A machine built by humans saw this massive world in the year 2024. It measured its heat. It recorded its presence in the dark. And in the year 2025, when the greatest scientific minds on Earth looked for it again, it was completely gone. To truly understand the scale of this mystery and why it is keeping astronomers awake at night, we must understand exactly how we found this ghost in the first place. We must understand the absolute, terrifying precision of the James Webb Space Telescope. This is not a giant magnifying glass floating in space. It is a time machine and a heat-seeking missile combined into one. Human eyes are incredibly weak. We only see a tiny sliver of the universe. We see what we call visible light. But the universe is screaming in colors and frequencies that our biology is completely blind to. When a planet is sitting in the freezing vacuum of space, it does not create its own visible light. It only reflects the light of its sun. But as we already know, trying to see that faint reflection is impossible because the glare of the sun hides it. But planets do something else. They emit heat. Even a frozen gas giant sitting millions of miles away from its star radiates a tiny, microscopic amount of thermal energy. In the realm of astrophysics, this heat takes the form of infrared light. Imagine walking through a massive, pitch-black forest at midnight. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. You are completely blind. But if you put on military-grade thermal goggles, the invisible forest suddenly comes alive. You can see the glowing red outline of a deer hiding behind the trees. You can see the heat radiating off the rocks from the sun that set hours ago. The James Webb Space Telescope is the ultimate set of thermal goggles. It was built over 2 decades, costing roughly $10 billion. It was folded up like an intricate piece of origami, strapped to the top of a massive rocket, and blasted 1 million miles away from the Earth. It sits out there in the freezing dark, completely alone. Its primary mirror is made of 18 hexagonal pieces of a rare metal called beryllium. But beryllium alone is not enough to catch the faintest whispers of heat from the deep cosmos. Engineers coated those 18 mirrors in a microscopic layer of pure gold. They used gold because it is the perfect material for reflecting infrared light. It catches the thermal echoes of the universe and focuses them with a level of precision that is almost impossible to comprehend. If you were a bumblebee hovering over the surface of the moon, the James Webb Space Telescope could sense your body heat from Earth. That is how powerful it is. That is the level of absolute certainty we are dealing with. So, when the team of scientists pointed this golden eye at Alpha Centauri A in the year 2024, they were not guessing. They were not looking at fuzzy, ambiguous data. They used the coronagraph to physically block the blazing fire of the main star. They waited patiently as the starlight bled away. And then they saw it. A distinct, glowing ember in the infrared spectrum, a signal that matched exactly what a gas giant, roughly the mass of Saturn, should look like. This was not just any location. The telescope found this glowing dot inside the habitable zone of Alpha Centauri A. The habitable zone is a very specific, very delicate ring around a star. It is the exact distance where the temperature is not too hot and not too cold. If a rocky planet is sitting in this zone, it is possible for liquid water to exist on its surface. And where there is liquid water, there could be life. Finding a massive gas giant in this zone is deeply strange. Gas giants do not have solid surfaces. If you tried to land a spaceship on Jupiter or Saturn, you would just fall through the clouds forever. The pressure would increase until your ship was crushed like a tin can. And eventually, the gases become so highly compressed that they turn into a bizarre ocean of liquid metal. There is no water ocean. There is no solid ground for a forest to grow. But gas giants have massive gravitational pulls, and because of that, they collect moons. Jupiter has dozens of moons. Saturn has dozens of moons. Some of these moons are massive. Some of them are completely covered in thick ice, hiding deep, dark oceans of liquid water underneath. If a massive gas giant is sitting in the habitable zone of Alpha Centauri A, it means it could be pulling along a system of giant moons. Moons bathed in the warm light of a yellow sun. Moons that could potentially harbor the conditions for biology. For a brief moment, the discovery of this candidate planet felt like a revolution. It was the holy grail of modern astronomy, a potential home for life, or at least the architecture for it, sitting right next door in our closest stellar neighborhood. The scientific community was vibrating with tension. They meticulously analyzed the data. They double-checked the calibration of the instruments. They made sure the telescope had not picked up a false signal from a glitch in the software. The glowing dot was real. The heat signature was undeniably present. But science demands verification. You cannot claim to have found a new world based on a single photograph. You have to watch it move. Planets are bound by the invisible chains of gravity. They must orbit their star, based on the distance from Alpha Centauri A. The astronomers calculated exactly how fast this new planet should be moving. They predicted exactly where it should be located 1 year later. This is the basic clockwork of the cosmos. If you know the mass of the star and the distance of the planet, you can map its future trajectory with absolute mathematical certainty. So, they waited. The Earth completed another orbit around our own sun. The calendar turned to the year 2025. The team took control of the Space Telescope once again. They meticulously aligned the golden mirrors. They activated the freezing cooling systems. They deployed the coronagraph mask to block the blinding glare of the star. They pointed the lens at the exact mathematical coordinates where the Saturn-sized giant was guaranteed to be. They expected to see the glowing ember. They expected to track its journey through the dark. They saw absolutely nothing. The space was completely empty. The heat signature was gone. The dark ocean of the void stared back at them in total silence. Imagine the sheer panic in that room. Imagine the sudden, creeping feeling of dread when the most advanced instrument in human history tells you that a world, a massive sphere of gas and gravity, has simply ceased to exist. The team desperately searched the surrounding area. They expanded the field of view. Did the planet move faster than they predicted? Was it thrown off its orbital path? Nothing. The ghost had vanished. When a scientific anomaly of this magnitude happens, researchers do not immediately assume the impossible. They rely on the scientific method. They try to find the most boring, logical explanation first. The very first theory was simple. The planet was playing hide and seek. Perhaps the orbit of this gas giant was highly elliptical. Perhaps it was not moving in a perfect circle, but in a long, stretched out oval. If that were the case, maybe the planet had simply swung behind the massive star. Maybe it was hiding directly behind the blinding glare of Alpha Centauri A. It sounds logical, but the math immediately destroyed this theory. To swing behind the star in just 1 year, the planet would have to be moving at an impossible speed. It would have to be locked in a violently close orbit, far outside the habitable zone where it was originally detected. The physics simply did not add up. The orbital mechanics refused to allow this scenario. So, they moved to the second theory, the dust cloud illusion. What if the glowing dot they saw in the year 2024 was never a planet at all? The universe is a violent place. Asteroids and comets are constantly colliding. What if, in that exact moment in time, two massive, icy asteroids violently smashed into each other deep inside the Alpha Centauri system? The sheer force of that collision would instantly vaporize the rocks, creating a colossal, expanding cloud of hot dust and glowing debris. To the infrared eyes of the space telescope, a massive cloud of fresh, glowing dust could theoretically look exactly like the heat signature of a gas giant. It is a terrifying thought. If this theory is true, the telescope did not witness a planet. It witnessed a cosmic murder. It witnessed the violent destruction of celestial bodies. And as the year passed, that glowing cloud of dust would have expanded. It would have thinned out. It would have cooled down as it dispersed into the freezing vacuum of space. By the time the telescope looked back in the year 2025, the dust would be too cold and too faint to detect. The heat signature would vanish. It is a beautiful, brutal explanation. But even this theory has massive holes. To create a dust cloud dense enough and hot enough to mimic a Saturn-sized planet, the collision would have to be apocalyptic. It would require two objects roughly the size of the Earth smashing together at tens of thousands of miles per hour. While these events happen in young, chaotic star systems, the Alpha Centauri system is ancient. It is billions of years old. Its orbital paths should have been cleared of major debris a long time ago. The chances of a cataclysmic collision of that magnitude happening right as we decided to point our telescope at it are astronomically low. It is like pointing a camera at a random empty highway in the middle of the desert and capturing a head-on collision between two speeding semi-trucks in the very first second you hit record. Possible, but highly improbable. This led the scientists to a third, even more unsettling theory. The background phantom. What if the object was not inside the Alpha Centauri system at all? Remember, space is entirely three-dimensional, and distance is an illusion. Imagine holding your finger up in front of your face and aligning it perfectly with a distant airplane flying in the sky. To your eye, your finger and the airplane look like they are occupying the exact same space. But in reality, they are separated by miles of empty air. What if the glowing dot was actually an ancient, massive galaxy located billions of light years away, far beyond the Alpha Centauri system. Because the universe is constantly expanding, the light from distant galaxies gets stretched into the infrared spectrum. This is exactly what the telescope was designed to see. Perhaps, in the year 2024, a distant galaxy perfectly aligned with our view of the star. And because the star itself is moving through space. By the year 2025, the star had drifted. It had shifted its position just enough to physically block that distant galaxy from our view. The star simply slid in front of the background object, hiding it behind a wall of atomic fire. This theory is the most comforting. It removes the mystery of a vanishing planet. It turns the anomaly into a simple trick of cosmic geometry, an optical illusion caused by the slow drift of the stars. But to many scientists, this explanation feels incomplete. It feels like trying to put a small bandage over a massive, bleeding wound in our understanding of physics. Because to accept the background galaxy theory, you have to accept an alignment so perfect, so absolutely flawless, that it borders on the absurd. You have to believe that out of all the empty space in the dark, a massive background object just happened to perfectly overlap with the tiny habitable zone of our closest neighbor. Right at the dawn of our ability to see it, the scientific community is fractured. The data is sitting right there on the servers. The empty black pixels from the year 2025 are a stark, silent taunt. The greatest machine ever constructed by human hands has hit a wall. It peered into the blinding searchlight next door. It saw a ghost, and then the ghost dissolved. And as we stand on the edge of this terrifying void, staring at the raw, unexplainable data, a much darker realization begins to creep into the minds of the astronomers. A realization that maybe the disappearance of the planet is not a glitch. Maybe it is not an optical illusion. Maybe it is not a cloud of dying dust. Maybe the rules of gravity, the rules of time, and the rules of mass do not work exactly the way we thought they did. Because if a world the size of Saturn can simply vanish in the dark without a trace, what does that mean for the ground beneath our own feet? What does that mean for the fragile, spinning rock that we call home? If our closest neighbor is hiding impossibilities in its shadows, we are forced to ask a question that no one is truly prepared to answer. What if the dark is actively changing the rules? There is a very comforting, very dangerous illusion that modern humans share. We believe that with enough time, enough money, and enough technology, every mystery in the universe can be solved. We believe that science is a straight road leading to absolute truth. But the universe is not a road. The universe is a labyrinth built out of chaos, and sometimes you hit a solid brick wall. The disappearing planet of Alpha Centauri is not just a missing object. It is a mathematical paradox. It is a terrifying knot in the fabric of physics that actively refuses to be untied. When the scientists looked at the empty space in the year 2025, they did not just lose a planet. They lost their grip on the rules of reality. To understand why this missing ghost is breaking the minds of the greatest astrophysicists on Earth, we must confront something called the three-body problem. For hundreds of years, we've been incredibly good at calculating the gravity between two objects. If you have a single star and a single planet, the math is beautiful. It is clean. The gravity of the star pulls on the planet. the momentum of the planet pushes it forward, and they lock into a perfectly predictable, eternal circle. You can run the equation 1 billion years into the future, or 1 billion years into the past, and you will always know exactly where that planet is. But the very second you introduce a third massive object into the system, the math shatters. Alpha Centauri is not a single sun. It is 2 massive suns, Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B, orbiting each other. If you place a massive gas giant into that system, you now have 3 massive bodies locked in a gravitational war. Imagine holding 2 incredibly powerful, heavy industrial magnets. You start spinning them around each other in a tight circle. Now, drop a heavy steel ball bearing right into the middle of that spinning magnetic field. What happens? The ball bearing does not find a smooth, peaceful path. It gets violently jerked back and forth. The first magnet pulls it close, then the second magnet rips it away. The path of the ball bearing becomes completely erratic. It loops, it zigzags, it accelerates wildly, and then it decelerates just as fast. This is the 3-body problem. In the late 19th century, mathematicians realized that it is fundamentally impossible to create a perfectly predictive formula for 3 massive objects orbiting each other. The gravity becomes chaotic. The smallest microfraction of a difference in position today leads to a completely unpredictable disaster tomorrow. This is the terrifying reality of the planet we thought we found. If that Saturn-sized gas giant truly existed in the year 2024, it was surviving in the middle of a chaotic gravity storm. It was being endlessly tortured by the competing pulls of 2 burning suns. And this leads us to the most violent theory of the vanishing planet: the ejection paradox. What if the planet did not just hide behind a cloud of dust? What if it did not just slip behind the central star? What if the chaotic gravity of the 2 suns finally broke the delicate balance and literally ripped the planet out of the solar system? In the dark science of astrophysics, this is called a scattering event. The 2 stars get slightly too close together. Their gravitational fields overlap in a very specific, very aggressive way, and they act like a cosmic slingshot. They grab the gas giant, accelerate it to unimaginable speeds, and violently kick it out into the freezing void of deep space. The planet becomes a rogue world, a massive, pitch-black sphere of frozen gas, doomed to wander the empty abyss between the stars forever, with no sun to warm it and no orbit to anchor it. It is a chilling thought. The James Webb Space Telescope might have accidentally taken a photograph of a massive world, right in the final moments before it was exiled into the dark. But, just like every other explanation in this mystery, the ejection theory crashes violently into the wall of human logic because of time. If the planet was violently ejected from the habitable zone, it had exactly 1 year to completely leave the view of the James Webb Space Telescope. From August 2024 to August 2025. To move a planet the mass of Saturn completely out of the frame in just 365 days, the planet would have to be traveling at a speed that defies physical comprehension. It would have to be moving at millions of miles per hour. You cannot simply accelerate a giant ball of gas to that speed in an instant. The sheer force of that gravitational kick would not just move the planet, it would obliterate it. The sheer kinetic shockwave would tear the gas giant's atmosphere apart, ripping its core to shreds and leaving behind a massive, chaotic trail of planetary blood. A glowing streak of debris across the star system. But the telescope did not see a trail of debris. It saw nothing. A clean, empty space. So, if the planet cannot mathematically hide, and it cannot mathematically be thrown away without leaving a massive scar, we are forced to look away from the stars and look down at our own machines. We are forced to question the very nature of human sight. We treat the James Webb Space Telescope like an all-seeing eye. We treat its data as the undisputed gospel of the cosmos. But we forget that it is still just a physical machine, built by flawed hands, bound by the absolute limits of optics. When we talk about finding a planet 4 light-years away, we imagine a clear, crisp photograph. We imagine seeing a beautiful round sphere floating in the dark. That is a lie. The reality of deep space observation is messy. It is frustrating. It is built on microscopic fragments of light. When the telescope takes an image of Alpha Centauri, it does not return a smooth painting. It returns a grid of pixels, tiny, jagged squares of digital information. The blinding glare of the star takes up hundreds of these pixels. The planet we found in 2024, it was not a grand sphere. It was roughly 2 pixels wide, 2 glowing squares of heat, sitting right on the absolute edge of the noise. Imagine standing in a completely dark stadium. Someone is standing on the opposite side of the field, shining a military-grade laser pointer directly into your eyes. Now, imagine someone else is standing next to that person, holding a single glowing matchstick. Your job is to describe the matchstick. The glare of the laser creates a halo in your vision. The light spills over. It creates false shapes. It creates optical artifacts. When the team deployed the coronagraph mask to block the fire of Alpha Centauri A, they were trying to block the laser pointer. But starlight is essentially a fluid. It bends around the physical mask. It leaks into the surrounding pixels. The scientists have to use incredibly complex computer algorithms to scrub the leaking starlight away, hoping that what is left behind is a real object. What if the 2 pixels of heat we saw in 2024 were just a statistical phantom? A momentary alignment of leaking starlight, electronic noise, and the freezing temperature of the telescope itself, creating a ghost in the machine. But to accept that is to accept a deeply depressing reality. It means that the most expensive, most advanced instrument ever conceived by our species is still not powerful enough to clearly see the front porch of our closest neighbor. It means that the wall of light is truly impenetrable. And yet, the scientists who spent years designing the instruments refused to believe it was just noise. The heat signature was too distinct. The wavelength was exactly what a Saturn mass object should produce. The machine did not fail. The math did not lie. The paradox tightens. We have a planet that must exist because the data demands it, but cannot exist because gravity forbids it. We have a vanishing act that is too fast to be orbital movement, too clean to be a violent destruction, and too perfectly timed to be a random glitch. The frustration inside the astronomical community is palpable. You can hear it in the careful, measured words of the researchers when they publish their papers. They use terms like candidate object and unresolved anomaly. They hide their existential dread behind the sterile language of academia, because they know what it means if they are wrong. They know that if the James Webb Space Telescope cannot reliably identify a gas giant circling our absolute closest neighbor, then every other planet we claim to have found, thousands of light years away, is suddenly brought into question. The very foundation of modern exoplanet science begins to tremble. And as they prepare for the ultimate test, the critical follow-up observation planned for August 2026, the silence of the void feels heavier. The delayed light from Alpha Centauri continues to pour onto the Earth, bringing information from 4 years in the past. The truth is already out there. Whatever happened to that massive world has already happened. We are just waiting for the ghost of that event to finally reach our mirrors. But what if the telescope looks again and the planet is back? What if it returns to the data? Not where it should be, but somewhere entirely new. This is the barrier we have hit. We are like children pressing our faces against a thick pane of glass, watching the shadows move in a locked room. We can describe the shapes. We can guess what is making them. But we cannot open the door. We cannot touch the reality on the other side. And the longer we stare at the empty space where a world used to be, the more we realize that the dark is not just hiding things from us. When a fundamental rule of reality breaks, it does not make a loud noise. It does not announce itself with a grand, theatrical explosion in the sky. It happens quietly. It happens in the cold dark, leaving behind a terrifying silence. For over 400 years, human beings have built a mental fortress out of mathematics. We constructed a massive, beautiful wall of equations to protect ourselves from the chaos of the unknown. We convinced ourselves that if we just did the math correctly, if we just built a big enough telescope, the universe would eventually make sense. We believed that the cosmos was a machine, and we were the mechanics figuring out how the gears turned. But the empty space in the Alpha Centauri system is a deep, jagged crack in that wall. And through that crack, a very cold wind is blowing in. If a world the size of Saturn can simply vanish from the view of the James Webb Space Telescope, it means our fortress is an illusion. It means we are fundamentally misunderstanding the machinery of the dark. And the consequences of that misunderstanding are deeply unsettling for the future of human survival. To grasp the true horror of this, we have to talk about the things we cannot see. When we look out into the universe, we only see things that interact with light. We see burning stars. We see glowing dust. We see the heat of giant planets. But scientists have known for decades that all the light in the universe, every star and every galaxy combined, makes up only a tiny fraction of what is actually out there. The vast majority of the universe is completely invisible. It is made of something we call dark matter. We do not know what dark matter is. We cannot touch it. We cannot capture it in a jar. The James Webb Space Telescope cannot photograph it, no matter how cold its mirrors get. But we know it exists, because we can see its gravity pulling on the things we can see. Imagine walking down a street on a freezing, pitch-black night. You cannot see the wind. But as you walk under a street lamp, you see dead leaves swirling violently in a circle. You know the wind is there, because the leaves are being dragged by an invisible force. What if the missing planet in the Alpha Centauri system is a dead leaf caught in an invisible hurricane? What if a massive, rogue clump of dark matter, a dense, invisible wrecking ball, drifted quietly through our neighbor's solar system. It would emit no heat. It would block no starlight. Our absolute best technology would be completely blind to it. But its gravitational pull would be overwhelmingly real. If a silent, invisible leviathan like that passed through the habitable zone, it would grab the massive gas giant and rip it violently out of its orbit. It would drag the planet into the freezing void without leaving a single glowing trace for us to see. The planet would simply be swallowed by a shadow. And this brings us to the most terrifying consequence of the speed of light: the absolute horror of the delay. We already established that Alpha Centauri is roughly 4 light-years away. That means the light hitting the lens of the James Webb Space Telescope is always 4 years old. We are always watching a delayed broadcast of the past. If a violent cosmic event, an invisible wrecking ball of dark matter, or a chaotic gravity storm destroyed or exiled that massive planet, it did not happen today. It happened 4 years ago. For 4 entire Earth years, the physical consequences of that violence have been spreading through the dark. Imagine standing in a wide open field at night. In the far distance, you see the bright flash of lightning, but the air around you is completely silent. You are just standing there in the dark, waiting for the sound wave to finally hit you. You know the storm is real. You just do not know when the blast will arrive. Alpha Centauri is our closest neighbor. In the grand, infinite scale of the galaxy, 4 light-years is a fraction of a millimeter. We are sharing the exact same cosmic neighborhood. We are sitting in the splash zone. If there are invisible forces drifting through our local space, forces massive enough to erase a Saturn-sized world from the map, we would never see them coming. Our solar system is flying blind through a dark forest. We are sitting perfectly still in a wooden house while something massive is moving through the trees outside. This realization completely shatters the greatest dream humanity has ever had: the dream of leaving the Earth. Since the middle of the 20th century, we have looked up at the stars and promised ourselves that we would eventually conquer them. We wrote thousands of books and filmed endless movies about building massive spaceships, leaving our solar system and colonizing the galaxy. And Alpha Centauri was always step 1. It was the natural first stop. The safe harbor. We named it. We studied it. We designed hypothetical probes to sail across the void and visit its planets. We treated it like a guaranteed destination for our great-grandchildren. But if the safe harbor is actually a chaotic meat grinder, the dream of interstellar travel suddenly feels like a suicide mission. If we cannot even trust the fundamental laws of physics holding our closest neighbor together, how could we ever risk sending human beings across the dark? How could we ever build a ship capable of navigating a void where giant planets simply cease to exist? The vanishing planet is a brutal, humbling warning from the universe. It is a massive stop sign placed right at the edge of our solar system. It tells us that space is not a neat, organized highway waiting to be explored. It is an active minefield. It is an ocean filled with unseen currents and crushing depths. For decades, we assumed that our technological progress would inevitably make the universe feel smaller. We thought that building better rockets and launching bigger telescopes would turn the terrifying unknown into a familiar backyard. The exact opposite is happening. The more powerful our machines become, the deeper we peer into the dark. the more we realize how dangerously isolated we truly are. The James Webb Space Telescope was supposed to bring Alpha Centauri closer to us. Instead, it revealed an impenetrable wall of mystery that pushes our neighbor infinitely further away. We are a fragile species, marooned on a tiny speck of wet rock. We spent billions of dollars and decades of human life building a giant golden eye, just to peer across the pitch-black ocean to the next island. We wanted to see if the island was safe. We wanted to see if anyone was there. But the very first thing we saw was a massive piece of the island, quietly being dragged under the water. We give things names because names give us the illusion of control. We looked up at the terrifying, infinite void above our heads, and we tried to tame it with words. We named the constellations. We named the galaxies. We pointed at the brightest light in our immediate neighborhood and called it Alpha Centauri. We mapped its coordinates, calculated its mass, and assumed that by labeling it, we somehow owned it. But the universe does not care about our maps. It does not care about our math, our telescopes, or our absolute desperate need for permanence. The missing planet is a monument to our ultimate insignificance. It is a brutal reminder that we are not the masters of this reality. We are not the mechanics of the cosmic machine. We are just a temporary biological accident, clinging to a wet rock, peering out into a darkness that operates on rules we cannot possibly comprehend. For decades, we looked at the stars and felt a sense of destiny. We thought the vast emptiness of space was an empty stage, waiting for us to eventually build our ships and step out into the light. We thought the silence of the void was just waiting for our voice. We were naive. The silence is not waiting for us. The silence is the sound of a predator. It is the sound of an ancient, crushing machine that can erase a world billions of times larger than our own, without leaving a single trace. In August of the year 2026, the team on Earth will send another command into the dark. The James Webb Space Telescope will open its golden eye, lower its temperature to absolute freezing, and look directly at the habitable zone of our closest neighbor one more time. Astronomers will hold their breath, hoping that the missing planet was just a glitch. They will pray for an optical illusion. They will pray for the math to suddenly make sense. But the damage to our intuition has already been done. Because if the planet is truly gone, we are forced to accept that the dark ocean surrounding our tiny island is filled with unseen monsters. We are forced to accept that rogue gravitational tides and invisible forces can sweep through our immediate neighborhood and rip entire worlds into the abyss. And if the planet suddenly returns, appearing exactly where it was before, that is somehow even worse, because a universe that can simply turn a massive gas giant off and on again is a universe where reality itself is unstable. Either way, the comforting illusion of our safe little solar system is dead. The next time you walk outside at night and look up at the peaceful white diamonds scattered across the black sky, remember what is actually out there. Remember the violent, unpredictable forces tearing through the dark. Remember the missing world right next door. There is no cosmic safety net. There is no grand plan protecting the Earth from the exact same fate. We are floating completely unprotected in the middle of an active, indifferent abyss. And the dark is only getting deeper.